It is Monday, which makes it time for Mississippi Outdoors Radio here on Super Talk Mississippi. Always good to have the guys in studio. Adam Butler joins us as always. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good.
Glad to hear.
I'm doing good. We're in the heart of it now, Dave.
Yeah, it's busy season for you guys.
Yeah. Well, like we were saying before the show, we've got stuff to talk about now.
Got more to talk about than we have time for.
We don't have to. It's not summertime where we're just thinking of things, twiddling our thumbs. We got a lot to talk about.
I reminded you of July earlier, and you're remembering it now.
Yeah.
Where we're like, what could we possibly talk about this week? And then we always came up with something, and now it's trying to narrow it down to what we can get in. Yeah. Joining you here in the studio, Houston Havens, Waterfowl Program Coordinator. How are you, Houston?
Doing well.
Hadn't seen you in a few weeks.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, but you got a big event coming up this weekend. So.
That's right. And the good news is, regardless of weather, we're still planning to have it. So.
Very good. Very good.
But the weather is not looking all that great.
It's right.
No. And it's going to be hot.
Yeah.
Why? You and I were talking before the break. Why are we looking at 80 degrees on Thanksgiving week?
I don't know.
That's not stupid.
All those old, like the old Norman Rockwell painting of Thanksgiving, people are supposed to be bundled up and they're flannel and, not so much. It's going to be 80 degrees.
No, not even going to be able to see your breath. Nothing. You should at least be able to see your breath.
Maybe we'll get a white Christmas or something, snowy Christmas. My kids want that. They want to see snow this year. They keep hounding me about why can't we see snow in Mississippi. I have to explain to them it's not really a thing we have here.
It's 80 degrees on Thanksgiving. That's why. Now eat your turkey. That's about all you can say at that point.
Yep.
And you said that would be a good thing, so it's practically a guarantee that's not going to happen before the first of the year. Come on.
Right.
I noticed we have a vacancy here in the studio.
Yeah. Major Reed, I don't know what happened. I don't know. He outpaced himself this weekend, I guess. He probably wrote too many tickets, and he needs to take a break.
He had to check into a facility for law enforcement for exhaustion, right? Yeah.
We're going to carry on without him.
Well, we'll do the best we can.
We can make fun of him.
Yeah, until you pointed it out, I hadn't noticed he wasn't here. We're going to talk with Houston a little bit later. Duck season is coming up this weekend, but this past weekend that we just finished, opening weekend of gun season for deer. How'd it go, Adam?
Well, the reports I've heard were pretty slow. And I know we're joking about the weather, but it was a little bit on the warm side. Not exactly ideal deer hunting conditions. Our staff across the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, whether you're a conservation officer, checking hunters, or whether you're a biologist trying to collect biological data and samples and things like that, we're all out and about that opening weekend. And just the reports I've heard was, maybe a lot of folks chose to stay home or, wait, keep their powder dry for better days. So, and deer movement was not very good from most of the reports I'm getting.
It was too hot.
Yeah. So, if you'll think back, Dave, the beginning of the archery season was just about as good, as it could possibly be as far as the weather went. So this was kind of the opposite of that. So, it'll get better. It always does. That's the good thing about our deer season here in Mississippi is the best is usually yet to come. Don't pin too much on the opening day. That normally as we get a little closer to Christmas on over into December, get closer to the rut, things are going to pick up and deer movement will pick up, and hopefully it'll cool off a little bit. So more to come.
Now we had the mandatory sample return for the CWD zone this weekend for opening weekend up in the northwest part of the state and down the river a little bit there in that CWD zone. How did that go?
Well, I do, I'm going to just be blunt, Dave. It didn't really go well, to be honest with you. We set those mandatory dates up in an effort to get more CWD samples. And, I know, perhaps a lot of hunters are tired of hearing about CWD, and that's understandable. It is not something that we want to think about, but the whole purpose of having the mandatory sampling days was to get a tremendous number of samples so that we feel like we have adequately sampled those areas that are adjacent to counties where we have found CWD or adjacent counties, and we just really did not see great compliance with that regulation. And don't want to badger our listeners too bad, but moving forward, we as an agency and as a state and as a the community of hunters out there, we can't combat this disease without their help, without hunters' help. And I know we often get questions about when are certain counties coming out of the CWD zone, when can people go back to feeding deer, that sort of stuff. Well, those regulations can't change until we get the adequate samples we need to know where the disease is and where it isn't. And so that was the whole purpose of having this mandatory sampling weekend over this past weekend in the CWD zone. To be blunt, like I said, we were hoping for a lot more samples than what we got. I don't know what the total is at this point, but certainly don't think it probably represents what the true harvest was out there. So season's not over. And we have, as we've talked about many times on the show, we have all of those drop-off locations scattered throughout the state. If you're a hunter, particularly if you're in the CWD zone, you shouldn't have to go very far to get to one of our drop-off locations. From here going forward in those areas, it's not mandatory, but we still encourage it. And again, keep in mind, we're asking for this information for hunters' benefit so that we can figure this thing out and hopefully loosen up regulations at some point.
Now, the scary part about this, to me anyway, is that you've had last year, for example, decent compliance in the CWD zone. It was some of the other areas down in southwest Mississippi and down along the coast.
And this was the what we did this past weekend was sort of based on, if you'll remember, last year we did in the CWD zone a sort of a special season after the fact. After the regular deer season had closed, we wanted to get more samples in that area of the state, particularly those northern tier counties. And so we had an extra weekend added into February on deer season, and the deal with that was if you took a deer during that season, you had to bring it in to get it sampled. And we did have tremendous number of samples came in over that weekend, and we were very pleased with the results of that. So we felt like, well, going into this year, we'd like another repeat of that and bump up the sample total from those areas. And unfortunately, I think we were a little lacking, but we still got more time, and people can take deer and drop them off, and hopefully we'll get what we need.
Do you think that it had any impact on the number of samples you got, just the overall feeling that people are tired of going through mandatory things due to illness?
I didn't think of it that way, but it could be. It's certainly 2020 has certainly been a year where I'm sure everyone is sick of hearing anything disease related. I know you're probably sick of talking about it. But I don't know. And probably a lot of it, I think just in general wasn't a great deer movement weekend. Was not ideal hunting conditions, so that probably played into it too.
Thomas up in Greenwood says, no one that I know said they will get their deer checked, which is the attitude that we've got to change.
Right, and that's unfortunate. You hate hearing that because, ultimately our agency, the Department of Wildlife, Fish and Parks, is here to ensure that we have good deer hunting 50 years from now, and this disease is something to be taken seriously and considered in that big picture. And so we're just trying to do our job to get the information we need to understand what's going on with the deer herd.
We have Curtis and Biloxi on the C Spire text line. You've answered this before, but let's go over it again because we are getting the question. What do hunters need to drop off at the stations when they're dropping a sample off?
Sure. The sample that we ultimately take are the lymph nodes. So just like if you feeling a little ill, might have the crud, and you go to the doctor and he's going to feel right underneath your throat and see if those lymph nodes are swollen. That's actually what we end up getting. We're going in and taking those out. And so what we need is essentially you'd bring the head and neck to our drop-off locations. And we ask hunters to leave to just take the head when they're cleaning the deer and take it to those drop-off locations. And from the voluntary check stations that are scattered throughout the state, there will be a freezer there. There will be garbage bags to put that head in, put it in the freezer. There will be tags there. It's pretty self-sufficient in terms of understanding the process. Once you get there, there'll be some signs and directions and stuff. So.
Take the antlers off.
That's right. You're not going to get those back, and we don't need them. But that's what we're going for. We're ultimately trying to get those lymph nodes out of there, and that's what gets sent to the lab to get tested.
Fantastic. It's not that hard of a process, but we got to do it.
Right.
Got to do it because I'm sorry, you're messing with your kids hunting.
Right.
if you don't go do it.
And, just peace of mind knowing that that animal that you may be putting on your kitchen table didn't have anything wrong with it.
Yeah. Well, this year of all years, I think everybody's quick caring. I don't think it's as impactful as it
There
has
will
been.
never be a January 1st New Year's celebration that's probably more look forward to than just turning the page on 2020, huh?
We are going to party like we've never partied before. I have no doubt. When we come back, Houston Havens, we're going to talk duck season. It's coming up at the end of this week. We'll talk to Houston about that next on Mississippi Outdoors Radio. Welcome back to Mississippi Outdoors Radio, Super Talk Mississippi. Houston Havens in the room, and you're about to get busy, my friend.
We are. Duck season is upon us. It's coming, ready or not. So hopefully have more people out there who are ready than not.
Well, obviously the deer folks have no pull on this. Can you get the temperature down for the ducks at least?
We are working on it. Luckily, like the deer season, we've got a ways to go here in Mississippi yet. So just hopefully looking toward better things to come.
Now, in all seriousness, the temperature really up north affects it more than the temperature here, doesn't it?
That's right. It's migration is a complex phenomena, but yes, weather very much to the north of here, not just what's going on in Mississippi. Of course, when you're out hunting, I'm the same way. You want it to be cold. You want it to feel appropriately, for the season. But we can get birds here without it really being extremely cold here for sure.
Well, what have you heard from reports up north? Is that the case? Are we going to have a good movement?
Don't know yet if we're going to have good enough movements to get here yet, but I guess one of the major things that we know so far is they haven't overshot us, and we can talk about that a little bit more. We're talking about habitat in the Mississippi Delta, but a really dry year, if you get a really big migration and there's not a whole lot of habitat for them to stop here in Mississippi, there's potential for them to kind of overshoot us, so to speak. So we don't think that's happened. Still some good reports of above average numbers, to the north of us, which if you don't have them here, then you want them to be north of you. That's for sure at this point of the year.
And I will say this: that's one of the few bright sides of the flooding we've had in the Delta for the past couple of years. Because if we can fill up all that land that's covered by water, there's a lot of ducks.
That's right.
So that's good.
Yeah, and ducks are very good at responding to habitat conditions, habitat changes. We have some level of birds that are going to be here pretty well regardless, and that's kind of what we saw from our first round of surveys.
Now, how does the season play out? It starts this weekend, Friday. And then when does it run to? I think there's a split in there somewhere, isn't
That's right. So we this year have what I would call our traditional setup for duck season, where we go basically 2 weekends and then run straight through. So what Mississippi does is we have a maximum number of allowed days, 60 days in the hunting season under a little framework. And so we take that and usually go to the end, the latest date that we're allowed, which is January 31st, and we back it up. But we also do use those splits that are allowed there as breaks in the hunting season so we can maximize weekend opportunity is basically what we're doing there. So, that Friday after Thanksgiving is a traditional opener for Mississippi. We'll go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, close for a little while. Hopefully, get ducks a little more settled in, after that initial weekend hunt, and maybe pick up a few more birds, and then go another Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then we'll skip over to December 9th and run through the end of January.
Is it similar to deer season in the way that opening weekend, that's not going to be your biggest weekend?
Well, it depends on what measure you're looking at. It's typically not going to be your biggest as far as number of hunters in the field. A lot of that has to do with just habitat availability. So past couple of years, maybe it was pretty high because we had a good bit of water, if you'll think, back to the last couple of Novembers. This year going into it relatively dry, and so there's just not as many places for people to hunt, especially on private lands or areas where people are waiting on runoff to build up and to fill wetlands. So you're basically looking at natural habitats like sloughs, rivers, things like that, and then areas where you have groundwater pumping capabilities like we do on some of our wildlife management areas. So we definitely anticipate that habitat will increase as the season goes on. There'll be more places to hold birds and more places for people to hunt as well.
Now, you were talking about the migration and the habitats and how it's used, and one of the ways you check that is aerial surveys. What in the heck is an aerial survey? You go up in a hot air balloon? What are you doing, Houston?
Not exactly. We do get in a fixed-wing aircraft. We spend about 3 good solid days flying in the Mississippi Delta, basically hill line to river. we don't fly the entire area, and so that's one of the kind of things that maybe is a little bit hard to explain to the public when they're interpreting the information that we put out. We basically have a computer program that selects east-west transects, or just lines that we're flying. So we're not going where we know birds are. We're flying those lines that are randomly assigned before we even go up, and then collecting a GPS point and an observation point of how many birds were there, trying to identify those to species. The old joke is count their feet and divide by 2, but it's a little bit better than that. We like to think a little more scientific, and then we're also recording the habitat type that birds are using, whether it's a flooded ag field or moist soil habitat, things like that.
Why wouldn't you just count the heads?
That would probably be a better idea. Maybe we should try that next time.
Trying to cut your workload down for you some here, Houston. Now, have you done that yet for this season?
We have. We just finished up last Wednesday. Got the data, kind of crunched the numbers, got the data taken a look at, put some maps out, so our report is now online at mdwfp.com. Basically what we saw, we've talked a little bit about how dry it is. It's not to say that Mississippi is in really a drought, so to speak, as far as drought monitors go, but when we're talking about shallow managed water for wetland habitat availability that dabbling ducks are going to use primarily, we're quite a ways from where we normally would be with that kind of habitat. So overall, numbers were average for where we are in November, but if you take that into account with the relatively low habitat availability out there on the landscape, then you don't necessarily have to have a whole lot of birds to have good hunting. Of course, we would hope that the weather would cooperate with us a little bit. Weather has most of what there is to do with migration getting to Mississippi, but also just how birds behave when they're here. If it's warm weather, birds are not stressed. They don't have to feed constantly all day. Then they're a little bit, a little bit more hesitant to move around and maybe find themselves over a decoy set or what have you. But mallards were right on average for our long-term average. Total ducks overall were right along our average. So it could be a lot worse, with the amount of habitat that we have. So looking at some of our wildlife management areas, they have a lot or a large proportion of the managed habitat availability, both public and, state and federal public lands. So we would think that if we're around average bird numbers and have those quality managed habitats, that there's still going to be some good hunting this weekend.
Now, you talked about the report, said it was available on the website, right?
That's right. Yep. We got just a kind of a quick assessment of what we saw habitat wise, bird wise, and then also those distribution maps are typically what the public is interested in looking at. So, where we saw birds.
So mdwfp.com.
That's right.
You can go there and you can find it with no problem. You mentioned flying over the area and looking at it and looking at the different habitats and how much habitat we have available. What is a good duck habitat?
A good habitat is, it kind of depends on what kind of ducks we're talking about, but as a duck hunter, they're typically looking for mallards, other dabbling ducks, and then we have, some diving duck hunters in the state of Mississippi, but not a great deal of those. So typically what we're looking for is shallow managed habitat. That can either come from pumping groundwater during this time of year. A lot of that's out there has been pumped. So there's a cost and a lot of work that's associated with that, and that's one of the reasons that there's not a whole lot of habitat availability out there currently. But also birds are going to be using those natural wetlands, things like sloughs, river systems, oxbow lakes. So we did see a fair number of birds just kind of rafting up on those areas. Those are not typically food-rich environments for dabbling ducks. They're deep habitats, but birds are going to just kind of settle into an area and use the wetlands that are available, and then try to figure out the food situation after that. But overall, we're looking at moist soil, natural plant communities that are shallowly flooded, and then, of course, in the Mississippi Delta, flooded agriculture is also a big part of the habitat complex there.
Unfortunately. I hate to say it when we're coming up to the opening of duck season. I wish we didn't have that habitat. That would be nice. But at the same time, even from something bad, you can get something good, and this is an example of that.
Right. Well, we're, contrasting what we've seen the last couple of years with, a river flood or something like that. That's not, the same necessarily kind of flooding that we're talking about. We're talking about a farmer who has gotten his crop out, had a successful year, and then maybe is interested in duck hunting or flooding up his land to attract a leaseholder or something like that to come out. So we'll take that kind of habitat for sure.
Now, talking about habitat, how do we stack up against other states, specifically around us, Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee? How do we look compared to them?
Yeah, so southern states on the, kind of the terminus of the flyway, so to speak, are all relatively in the same boat. It's relatively dry. Louisiana's, the last report that I saw was basically their lowest on record as far as November waterfowl surveys. So you never want to see that even in a neighboring state, but, I guess the silver lining there is that there's ducks to the north of us that haven't overshot us, in a dry fall going into the season. So still much better things to come, we're hoping.
Well, and if somebody is going to have a record low bird count, I'd rather it be Louisiana than Mississippi. Nothing against the people in Louisiana, but come on.
Sure. And, we keep close tabs with other states, further up the river, up the flyway. Missouri and Illinois both. Not tremendously above their average for where they normally are this time of year, but they are above average. And so that's, maybe something a little bit more to look forward to as the season's getting open.
Talking with Houston Havens, Adam Butler from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks on Mississippi Outdoor Radio. We'll continue talking ducks, and we'll get into the migration, find out where they're at, what they're doing, how the trip's going. Hopefully it'll speed up a little bit and get here for opening weekend. We'll find out more about that next on Mississippi Outdoors Radio. Welcome back, Mississippi Outdoors Radio, and it's time for your Gateway Getaway on this Monday morning. This week, our Gateway Getaway is J.P. Coleman State Park in Iuka, Mississippi. J.P. Coleman State Park, one of the most scenic areas in the state and an excellent choice for a long weekend getaway. It's on the rocky bluff overlooking the Tennessee River. I'm in right there. That's all you had to say. J.P. Coleman offers the finest in all types of water sports. You can sail, swim, ski, and fish for smallmouth bass in the waters of Pickwick Lake. You can also enjoy camping and exploring in the untamed wilderness along the banks of the Tennessee River. And in addition to the water activities, they have picnic areas, a seasonal swimming pool, miniature golf, and a playground. Seasonal swimming pool, Adam, technically this isn't swimming pool season, but it's going to be 80 degrees this week.
A little Thanksgiving pool party, huh?
Yeah, I think you have to open it at that point. They have 69 RV campsites, 23 cabins, 16 motel rooms, and 3 townhouses. You can make your reservation by visiting our website at mdwfp.com, or you can call 1-800-467-2757, or call the park directly at 662-423-6515. And don't forget, you can also get a park permit. That annual park permit costs you $50 and gives you access to every single state park for a solid year. That is the deal that cannot be beat right now with the state parks in Mississippi. J.P. Coleman State Park, our Gateway Getaway today. And you guys have something new that has started up with the state parks that can go on your car.
Yeah, and I don't know much about it, Dave, so I don't want to say too much, but we've got a new state park tag out there. So any of our listeners who want to support state parks and time to renew a license plate, we've got a new one, and it looks really, really sharp. If you'll go to our website, they've got it up on the little scrolling marquee banner right now. Great job on that. Goes along. We've got all the other. You may want to get a turkey or a bass or a white-tailed deer, but some people don't want that. But the parks one looks really, really cool. So check that out.
And it's supporting the state parks.
There you go.
Which is something always worth supporting. Houston, before we get back into the migration, we have a question on the C Spire text line. Perfect day for it. You're the man to answer this question. No pressure. Jason in Laurel says, would you mind asking if it's legal to use live calling ducks while hunting like they did in the old days?
Not legal to use live decoys for hunting migratory birds. So,
well, that was a depressing answer, Houston. You could have been more positive and uplifting.
Yeah, the next best thing is just practicing on that duck call and just getting good enough to where you're sounding just like the real thing.
Yeah, you got to put the effort in.
But let's dig into this a little bit more. Even if it were legal, how would you go about doing that? Like, would you like squeeze the duck or make it like? How do you make the duck quack?
It's not a bike horn, Adam. You don't just squeeze it, do you?
This was well before my time, so no experience with it, but I believe it had something to do with, tethering a bird, with the leg. And
making it swim around.
That's right, basically
that makes
it
a little
out.
more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these are birds that are, quite vocal anyway, so they're going to do quite a bit of calling while they're while they're placed out in front of your blind.
I was thinking like one of those old Looney Tunes cartoons, you know,
Yeah.
they just squeeze it and it cracks or something. Yeah.
Okay,
that's a joke.
Yeah, that's not bad. Houston, let's quickly get off of this subject and back onto real subjects here. We were talking in the last segment about the duck migration, and you've said several times that they've got pretty nice bird counts up to the north of us.
Mm-hmm.
How does the migration work? What point are we at in the migration, and when can we expect to see some of those coming further down?
Yeah, so we're about right where we normally would expect to be as far as birds that are in Mississippi. It varies by species. So most of what we saw with our November survey was what we would call early migrant species, primarily gadwall and green-winged teal. Those are birds that are they're going to have a lower tolerance for winter weather, and so they're going to get on the move faster than something like a larger bird like a mallard would do. So some of those are going to just be photo migrators, photo periods. So length of daylight is just going to kind of trigger an internal response with them, and they're kind of basically kind of get antsy and get moving on south. So we're right about where we need to be. Definitely nothing alarming for what we're seeing or not seeing in Mississippi. If you look to the extreme north end of the Mississippi Flyway, states like Minnesota and up into the prairies of Canada, you've seen some snow cover. Temperatures that are significant enough to move birds southward, but we're still a long way. There's a lot of good quality managed habitat between Mississippi and those states or those provinces. So typically, as a waterfowl biologist, once we start getting into mid-December or so, I would say we're starting to look at those kind of Midwest states, mid-latitude, southern Illinois, over to Missouri, and kind of gauging what they're seeing, where they are relative to what they've seen in their long-term survey data to kind of give us a picture of what we can expect in the next couple of weeks. But all of that is weather, or a lot of that is still weather-related. So, if I'm looking at the weather for, a front, first of all, I want it to come from the north. It doesn't help us if it, just gets cold here and it's the same temperature in southern Missouri or Illinois. But also looking for sustained cold front, so a couple or 3 days of below freezing temperatures. That's really, going to kind of get into the range of really moving birds southward.
You got to get it down and keep it down.
That's right.
And the timing varies, but the one thing I think we can all count on is sooner or later they're going to make that move. It's just a question of when.
That's right. We've already got some of those birds that were going to come regardless of weather that we talked about earlier. If we get a relatively normal winter or maybe even a little more extreme than that, then that's going to kind of be the tale of how many birds and for how long they come down.
Now, let me ask you, you mentioned earlier about flooding in agriculture land.
Mm-hmm.
Being a good duck habitat. Do non-flooded agricultural lands play any part in this with crops that have been harvested?
A little bit more if you're a goose hunter. We get snow geese and what people call speckle bellies, white-fronted geese. Those are we don't get a lot of dry-feeding ducks in Mississippi. It's fairly rare, or actually really rare for us to see that. Ducks are typically going to use that shallow water, and then they'll walk up on the dry land a little bit, kind of use that what we call a fringe or feathered edge of that wetland habitat. Geese are going to be, kind of a half and half mixture in Mississippi once they're here. They'll be using those harvested ag fields that are dry, and then also using, as a water source those that are flooded. But yeah, harvested agriculture, just because that's the landscape in the Mississippi Delta, so it does play a large role for Mississippi. We saw another observation that we make when we're doing these surveys is, we can see, fields that are harvested and unharvested. So we saw a lot of harvesting that was still going on, particularly in rice and soybeans. So, of course, that's what those lands are operated for and owned for. So that's their primary, reason for having those. We definitely want those farmers to be able to get that crop out. But we're hopeful that after they do that, then they're going to, try to catch a little bit of winter rainfall later on to provide some waterfowl habitat.
Now, you mentioned wildlife management areas when you were doing the aerial surveys. Is anything different this year? Because everything's different this year.
That's
it seems
right.
Like
Yep.
Houston.
Yep. It's just following along with where we are with 2020. Yes, we did have to make some changes to how waterfowl draw hunts were run this year. And so all of those drawings have already been completed now. The winners have gotten their emails. showing what day that they're going to be hunting on the area, actually what hunt unit that they're going to be assigned to. So we encourage hunters to pay attention to that. Go online, go on our website and see where that hunt unit is. Maybe even visit the area before your hunt just to be sure you know what it's like, what to expect. So it's that can provide an advantage to hunters, especially if it's an area that they're not, they've never been on, they're not used to hunting. They're going to know ahead of time, where they're going to be, and so they can kind of check it out and get a game plan together.
Now, aside from no live decoys, what else do hunters need to know to make sure they're legal and Major Reed and his crew won't give them a problem while they're out in the field?
Yeah, it's some people kind of duck hunting can get a reputation of being a difficult, to know what to do or what to have, but it's that stuff doesn't really change a whole lot from year to year. You're going to need a Mississippi hunting license. If you're hunting on a wildlife management area, you will need a wildlife management area permit. The two additional license type things that waterfowl hunters are going to need to have is a state and a federal duck stamp or waterfowl stamp. Be sure that you have those, and when you get the physical stamp, just go ahead and sign your name across it and have that with you. You also need to have the Harvest Information Program survey taken, and that's as simple as answering a couple of questions when you're buying your license. Just telling them, hey, yes, I am going to hunt migratory birds this year. And so, license-wise, those are the things that you're going to need. In the field-wise, just want to remind hunters that they're going to need to use non-toxic shot. Most people are using steel, but there are some other alternatives out there.
No lead.
That's right, no lead shot when hunting waterfowl. Also, need to be sure that they have a plug in their shotgun. That's something that, if you use the same shotgun to hunt squirrels or rabbits or other small game, then you might have taken that plug out at some point where it could hold more than 3 shells. But if you're hunting waterfowl, you're going to need to have that plug in. No more than shotgun needs to be capable of holding no more than 3 shells.
Fantastic. Real quick, it's a quick answer here. Josh from Jackson on the C Spire text line. How far will a flock of ducks fly in one day when they migrate?
We don't have a great answer on that. Typically, ducks that are wintering in Mississippi, from what we've seen, with transmitters on birds, they're typically, in their day-to-day activities, are going to go about 10 to 15 miles. So that's a decent reference, I guess.
Okay. Good rule of thumb there. We will continue on Mississippi Outdoors Radio. Nicole Smith from the Museum of Natural Science joins us next. Adam on the C Spire text line just wanted to say John in Ridgeland texted in, said, just looked at the tag. Nice. The State Parks tag.
Yeah. It is nice, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It's a good-looking tag.
Very nice work. Very nice stuff. And nice work and nice stuff is what we're going to talk about with Nicole Smith over at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science. Nicole, how you doing today?
I'm great. It's been a long time. How are you guys?
Doing fantastic. Now, what do you have going on over at the museum?
Well, we're always up to something, and we've been really working on creating some COVID-safe and yet natural science educational events that will be fun and engaging. And so today, tomorrow, and the next day, we're doing something we call Talkin' Turkey, and it's activities and games and even a dance that's all about turkeys, so you can learn about their anatomy and just a little bit about their habitat, something that makes them special and helps you enjoy your holiday season a little more.
Now, it doesn't sound like recipes are going to play into this anywhere. This is more about the living turkeys, right?
Correct. So we have everything from a turkey feather anatomy investigation. We've kind of altered everything so that it can be done from a social distance, but also but still be pretty interactive. Like one of our educators has dressed in a turkey costume, and you're actually learning about turkey anatomy with her. Yeah, doing the turkey hokey pokey. You can put your waddle in, you put your waddle out, and then you shake it all about. Anyway, I know it sounds silly, but it's really fun. We even have created something we call the Story Trail Stroll, and it's a 14-stop hike along the Green Loop Trail. And at each stop, it's a different page in a book called Gobble Gobble, and it helps you learn about the natural history of turkeys, designed for level 2 readers. So you get a little outdoor time, and you learn a little bit about turkeys and get some exercise while you're at it.
Why, I just have this feeling somewhere in there, everybody's going to learn that Ben Franklin wanted the turkey to be the national bird, aren't they?
Actually, yes, we're having a turkey trivia game that we're calling Jeopardy, with the birdie.
Oh, no.
And I know, the groan. But there is a turkey trivia game, and that is one of the questions in the trivia game.
Yeah, I just saw it coming. You can't start learning about turkeys without learning that fact. I don't know much, so when I know something, I like to throw it out so I feel better about myself, Nicole.
It's a good one to share at cocktail parties. That shows how smart you are, so very good.
Now, this is going on, and like you said, you've kind of redesigned everything over at the museum right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Everything is operating differently.
Yeah, very differently. We have given so much thought to this. We have worked with the Department of Health. We have worked with the American Association of Museums. We have really, pulled on the collective brain power of our educators and research scientists to figure out what is a safe level of engagement. Like, how do we do something that people actually want to go to that looks fun, and but while still keeping people safe. So this Talking Turkey event, we picked this week because it is Thanksgiving week, and some schools are actually out of school right now. A few are still in school. But for those that are out, we wanted something for people to do. So from 10 a.m. until noon, and then again at 1 o'clock until 4 for today, tomorrow, and the next day, that's our Talking Turkey event. And you can just see it on Facebook. We have some pictures of it, how it goes, what it looks like. We are taking timed reservations, so that way, we're kind of managing the crowds in a healthy way. We do require masks. That's a safety thing. And we do have, anytime there is a touch experience, which are very few of them, but when there are touch experiences, we have a before and after Germex, availability. And we're just making the most of it. The weather's gorgeous, by the way. And even if you just wanted to come and take a hike on a trail, it's such a good time for it. When I drove up right after lunch today, I saw people playing disc golf. I think a lot of people forget that there is a disc golf game available on the museum grounds here in the LaFleurs Bluff State Park. So that's a fun thing to do. So just remember, we're here for you, and we've got these great things coming up.
And it's going on right now, and I assume they can find out more at the website, right?
Absolutely. You can go on our website, mdwfp.com, and look at the museum's calendar. You can look at the museum on Facebook, Mississippi Museum of Natural Science, and you'll see event pages that describe what's happening and what you need to do to come on over. We've also got some stuff coming up in December that we're going to want to talk about later. We're doing a really charming evening series of programs called Sippin' with Santa, and as in sipping hot cocoa in front of the Mississippi Sound while Santa dives and brings Christmas to the fishes. So that's coming up really soon in December. So we've got a lot coming your way. A Spin with Snowflakes event happening in December. We are trying to keep a little holiday in your season while doing it as COVID safely as possible.
Nicole, keep it up. Adam, Mississippi Outdoors TV this week?
Thanksgiving evening. Going to have a little alligator hunt and then a red snapper trip. So check that out after you've had your turkey and whatnot.
Thursday night at 7:30 on Mississippi Public Broadcasting. Adam, always enjoyed it. Nicole, always enjoyed talking to you. Houston, thanks for filling us in on the Rich Man Sport. That's it for Mississippi Outdoors Radio on this Monday. I'll meet you back here tomorrow morning at 10. See you then.